dude, you could write up your own trust and will for free on the internet, like just to
For
have
sure.
something, because that's really what it is you could go a whole life, do everything right, but miss that one piece of proper estate planning, and it could all be for nothing. In the end, the people who are going to benefit from all the hard work, all your investment income, all that stuff is going to be the attorneys that process your probate and bleed your family dry. And it's going to be Uncle Sam because you didn't properly set things up.
Alrighty, welcome to another episode of Wealth Wednesday. I'm Nate Crannell here with Mike Neubauer. Today we are talking about the 5 financial pitfalls that many physicians stumble into as they get started, as they go through attending, and as they get to retirement. First up, it's notorious, the delayed investing game. Residency's hard. You're working a ton of hours. You're getting paid very little to do all the hours that you're working, but starting to invest early can really protect the financial health, for the rest of your career. And I feel like a lot of physicians miss that. They just feel like, man, I have so much weight on me right now. There's no way I could even think about investing. What type of harm do you think that does long-term for someone?
Yeah, I think a lot of the tough part of it as well is, like especially in residency, like a lot of these people are doctors. So to their friends and family, they're a doctor. They don't
Mhm.
understand the difference. So they're trying to keep up this, kind of aura of I'm a doctor, which the only way to do that is to, keep enough money aside that you can live a normal life. So, of course, there's certain things that have to go. And I think typically investing is, the number one thing that gets put on the back burner because they know I'm going to make a lot of money down the road. And then I can start investing once I have that. I need this money now today. But yeah, compound interest. I mean, who was it? I think it was Ben Franklin. I don't know. I'm probably quoting the wrong person. But the great wonders of the world, and there's the great wonders of the world. And he said the final one is compound interest. And that is really the key. The earlier you start just getting a little something going, for 2 reasons: compound interest financially, at year after year, as that money grows, it just all of a sudden hits a tipping point where, I mean, there's just no looking back. That money is just working so hard for you, that it grows so quickly. But really the biggest thing as well is that it creates those habits. So when you create poor investing habits, when you have a little bit of money, you assume when I have a lot of money, I'll all of a sudden have these great investing habits. And I think the
Mhm.
downside is that most people create very poor habits. They then start making a good income, but now they have poor investing habits, and that never comes true. What they thought 10 years ago they would do doesn't actually become the case. So of course it makes a ton of sense to start investing, right away when you can, but most importantly is just to build those habits. So even if it's not, thousands a month that can go into investing, just creating that habit of a portion of my income always goes towards investing will pay huge dividends down the road.
Yeah, well said. Not even compound. I mean, compound interest is, it was Warren Buffett actually that said it's compound interest, eighth wonder of the world, uh, which is very true. I think also dollar cost averaging. So, like you said, creating a habit, even if you're in residency and it's, $50 a month, $100 a month, as long as you're setting something aside that builds that habit just to know, hey, this is within my budget, big or small, being able to build that habit and to create that investing muscle, to be able to do it is super important. And I think you're right. There's a lifestyle factor to it, right? There's, hey, I'm making some money. I'm not in medical school anymore where I'm living off loans. I'm pretty sure in residency you're still living on loans, to some extent. But I think the more that you can, just create a little bit of discipline, just to know that, hey, $100 a month is going over here, and whatever tool or vehicle it is that you're using to invest, as long as you know that you are building an asset along the way while also grinding and getting through residency, is super important. Let's talk about even after you get out of residency. Now you're an attending physician, you are making more money. The big focus is on, hey, let's start paying down debt. Usually people are starting families. Why is investing then even more important than it was in residency?
I mean, somewhat of what we just talked about, you got to invest
Hmm.
in because most people never did during residency. So now you're catching
Hmm.
up all those past years. If you come out of college, most people get a job out of college. They might start investing 401ks and stuff at age 22.
Yep.
So even if, let's say, you're 32 and now you're starting to make good money, you lost 10 years of runway that everybody else has. So, I mean, I don't know if yeah, well, I mean, we roomed together in college, so my story a
Hmm.
little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, I had planned to go to medical school, and then I took a real estate course for J term, which was what was it, like 3 week course or
Yep.
whatever during
Hmm.
Christmas break. But then I ran the numbers and I looked, and it wasn't until like age 36 that the physician route was going to be more beneficial financially. So before that, going down the firefighter route and the real estate that I did, that was way more beneficial at the time financially, because I got to start at age, I mean, I started at age 20, where otherwise I would have been going to school. So you're delaying all those years. So I think that's the biggest thing is it's fine to choose either path, but you have to know if you don't start making big money until you're in your 30s, you have a lot of catching up to do, which you have the income to do so, but you have to commit that income to that catch up financially. Because the other thing is you got to realize that, a lot of people, they may live off $100,000 a year and that's their normal lifestyle. Well, when you look towards retirement, if you want to maintain that lifestyle, that's a easier lifestyle to maintain. Granted, you have less dollars to put to work to maintain that lifestyle in retirement. But as a physician, if you're making three, four, $500,000 a year, first of all, I know that many people say like, "Oh, I'll reduce my cost of living when I get." I mean, you just don't. People get so accustomed. You have 30 some
Hmm.
years of living a certain way. You're not going to go from $500,000 a year to $100,000 a year. That would feel like you were living in poverty if you cut
Sure.
your lifestyle that much. But most people don't think that. They think, "Of course, I'll cut my lifestyle." So you just have a lot of catching up to do once you're attending first residency. And one point I was going to make, kind of to the last question, but ties into this one. I think the problem is, like, we talk about this all the time, right? This whole idea of retirement, I think, is crazy. But even just like the definition of what investing is. And I tell my kids, like, my oldest is 12. And I'm like, she is more financially literate than most grown adults making hundreds of thousands of dollars, just because she understands the very basic principles. And a lot of, we become adults, especially, we try to complicate things, and Wall Street tries to complicate it for us so that it's too difficult for us. But at the end of the day, investing is very simple. You go earn money, and when those dollars hit your account, you take those dollars. And I tell my kids all the time, George Washington on this $1 bill, you send George out to go work for you. He's an employee and he's
Hmm.
going out in the world to work for you. And that's all investing is when you earn, you trade your time for money. When that money comes back, investing means I'm taking this money and I'm sending this money out as little employees into the world. So the more employees you have that you can send out into the world to work for you, they go out and work, they send money back home. You take those new employees that they sent back and you start putting those back out to work in the world for you. So the more employees, quote unquote, the more money you have out in the
Hmm.
world working for you, the quicker money starts coming back to you, the quicker they start working harder than you have to start working on the earned income side. And the goal is at some point, I stop trading my time for money and I have my money that is being out in the world working for me to create the money that I need to live. And I think if people break it down into that simplified version, we had to break it down like that for our kids to understand what investing was. But when I talk to adults, I find out like, man, really, most adults need it broken down simply because we've never had this education. We don't have a clue what this really means. We think investing is to build a nest egg, to do investing is just sending money into the world as employees to go and work for you and send money back home. And I think really it simplifies things. It makes it almost more exciting to invest because like I'm not putting this money away for years. I'm sending this money out to work. And when you look at it that way, it's a little
Hmm.
bit more exciting to send the money out and an investment, when it's out going to work.
Yeah, and in that same breath, that was really good. I like that analogy, and I think that that financial literacy, we've talked about it before, is lacking for most people, mostly because they specialize in other things, right? If we're going to talk about physicians, they're specializing in their expertise within the healthcare field. They're not necessarily focusing on financial literacy, which that's what we're here for. But I think to your same point, where you're trading your time for money now as you're working. Once you get those dollars, then you're trading your dollars to then invest, get them working for you for that money to come back. So there, like you said, there is that point where as that return comes back and you get to use it again, now that it becomes a functionable tool for you to where you can use those dollars then for fun, for living, for all the things that you want. Where now people think I have to work to be able to then buy the things that I want and to do the fun things. There needs to be kind of a dual exchange of that money, and it shouldn't be giving up your time for that money. It should be returning that from investments that you've made previously.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that is finite in our world is time. So when you're trading time for money, once you trade it, it is gone. Money
Mhm.
is almost infinite. You can
Mhm.
almost make as much. I mean, for us, like an Elon Musk, billionaire, ton of money, and he could still make more. There's still enough money in the world to get even richer, Bezos, whatever. Money is almost infinite. To the feds, it is infinite. Anytime they need more, they just print it.
Yep.
But time is not. Everybody, whether you make billions like Elon Musk or you make, minimum wage, time is finite. You will never get that back. So the quicker you can shift the mindset from I'm giving up time to get money, you're going to be way, just light years ahead. And when I say light years ahead, not only do I mean financially, but just in fulfillment and satisfaction of life. Once your brain accepts that and you understand, man, time is only limited. I only have so much. I'm no longer going to trade time for money. I'm going to send money out to work, and that's going to put in the hard-earned hours, not me personally. And it doesn't happen all overnight, but once that mind shift happens, you start to look at the world that way, and it starts to happen very quickly. Speaking of Elon Musk, I mean, I'm kind of like a nerd of technology and all
Mhm.
that stuff. I would love a Tesla. I mean, like, I would love to buy a Tesla. I can afford a Tesla. I could go buy a Tesla tomorrow if I wanted, but I don't have a Tesla. I have an old vehicle. Now we bought our other, truck. But the reason I don't is because I just can't see 60,000 employees that could be out to work for me, sending money home. I can't imagine taking them out of work and going and buying a Tesla just so I can drive that around and sit it in my driveway. And like, as much as
Mhm.
I would love to do it, the way I see it, and I know that I'm taking 60,000 employees out of my workforce that would normally be out in the world as an investment, sending money home. Like, I just can't commit to taking those off the street.
Mhm.
I need those
Yep.
out working because I would rather be out here, living in Colorado in the camper for a couple weeks. I'd rather be doing this stuff than seeing my Tesla sit in the driveway. But it's hard until you make that mind shift change to start to see the world that way. But once you do see the world that way, like, there's no looking back. All of a sudden, that's how you see
Yeah.
everything, and you start making very um, intentional decisions about money and finances once you truly understand how money works and what it is.
Yeah. And you and I have been self-employed for years, so we kind of understand the grit and the grind that goes in. You got to invest your time to build something, right? I think Elon Musk is a great example of he was already a billionaire before he started Tesla, right? But he invested a ton of time, right? He wasn't making it, and he was actually putting a lot of his net worth into Tesla. But he was investing his time. So he was kind of doing both. He was investing dollars and investing time. But I mean, at one point, I don't remember, it was a couple years ago, Tesla stock went up. I mean, his net worth went up $100 billion overnight, simply because of the years of time and effort he put in. But more importantly, the dollars and the investment that he made into Tesla himself, that just returned back to it. He put billions of dollars of George Washington's out to work for him, and then it just paid back to him, obviously, with his net worth growing over $100 billion, overnight. That's a great example of how that can work for you. And I think a W-2 employee who's never started a business, worked for themselves, wouldn't see that, right? They just wouldn't understand that you can go out and invest that way to get your George Washington's growing for you, and you will see that return at some point in the future where you don't have to give as much as your time to still earn a great income.
Yeah, and on the flip side, most people fall into the trap. So not only do they not understand that side, they fall into the
Mm-hmm.
trap of like a mortgage on a house, where now you are trading your hard-earned money and the bank's dollars are out working for them. So they're on the wrong,
Mm-hmm.
total opposite side of the equation. So not only do they not have money out working on your behalf, you are now working on behalf of the bank's money. So the bank sent you, you buy $1 million house, the bank gave you 1 million George Washingtons. They're putting those to work, and you're out slaving away, sending money back to the bank because the bank understands this. They're sending their money to work so they can make more money. So you're on the
Mm-hmm.
total flip side of it. So not only are you not having money work for you, you're working on behalf of another company's money. But yeah, and really it is that simple, when we look at it. And then there's people like an Elon Musk, that they commit their life to doing that. I mean, he wants to change the world. And,
Mm-hmm.
some people have that amount of drive to go build billion-dollar companies, and that's going to take not only a ton of money working, but also a ton of time. But I mean, what is there? Less than 1% of the population in the world has that type of desire and drive to like truly change
Mm-hmm.
the world. Most of us want to make good livings so we can spend time with our family, make memories, hit the road, travel, do things that, we never really thought we could when we were younger, kind of take off these bucket list items. Most of us want that. And usually that's actually a lot closer, than we realize. The problem is we're on the other side of the coin. We don't have money
Mhm.
working for us. We're working for somebody else's money. So even like a physician working as a W-2 or even as a 1099, some company, some firm owns that hospital, owns that physicians
Mhm.
group. They put money in to establish this group, and they know these doctors are going to go work on behalf of that money. So somebody, I mean, maybe even not a doctor, sometimes just a finance guy goes and buys a physician's group. And now you're working not only same thing, like the mortgage, but now you're working on behalf of that guy's money who invests in your physician's group, and he's making his money work for him, and he's never done a surgery in his life.
Yeah, venture capital has really started to sneak its way into that market, and buying physicians groups and buying large hospital groups and things like that. That's happening right now. It really started, I think, about 10 years ago, and it's only going to get, their interest is obviously to grow their capital, and they'll find efficiencies within the physician group. But like you said, it went from a physician group, maybe 10 doctors that all own this together, and they were all quote unquote self-employed, to now they are working for someone else. Um, Maybe it's a dollar thing where they can get better technology because they're working through a venture group or venture capital group. I don't know those reasons, but that's certainly prevalent. But you made a good point a second ago about buying the $1 million house, and now that $1 million of George Washington's that were the bank, they put it out to work, and then obviously you're paying back a mortgage with interest that's going to get them more money. Let's talk about lifestyle. I think that is number 2 on our list of financial pitfalls that a lot of physicians make is, you know they get out of residency, maybe a fellowship program, all of a sudden they're attending, and their income goes from $50,000 a year to $300,000 a year, just like that. Then there's lifestyle inflation, right? They work hard, they start earning more money. Suddenly that dream car, that fancy house that they've always been looking forward to, seems right within reach, and letting their lifestyle run a little wild really can be a killer in those first 5 years. Why do you think it is? Is it the aura of being a physician now, being having that MD behind your name, that causes that, or is it just simply they've just been grinding so long that it's more of a I'm going to treat myself, I deserve this after so many years? What do you think creates that pitfall for them in those early years of being an attending physician?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of all of that, right? So they missed, they're trying to get a family going, and they're doing all those normal things, and they have committed their life to, the medical field, where we had time to maybe focus on finances and understand money, and so that's the route that we took. So back to the lack of education, there's just not a ton of financial literacy unless it's like a hobby. It's something that you enjoy reading about, but most don't. Most are focused on what they have. So they're lacking, they're now a grown adult. You should have financial literacy, like by the world
Yep.
standards, but you really haven't had the time or the resources to commit to learning that. So a lot of it is a lack of understanding at that point. But no doubt, I mean, coming up the whole time, you're working beneath people who have a ton of money, and one day I will get that. So for years, you're seeing, what does this lifestyle look like once I'm making $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year? And you're seeing what these people pull up in, the doctors that you're working under, you're learning
Hmm.
from. Maybe you go to the Christmas party, they invite you to their house. You're starting to see this, and this just becomes the norm of what you will have as soon as that money hits. That's the tough thing, is like, once that money hits, now you want to go do those things. You're not looking at the normal everyday house because you never got invited to a normal everyday house. This has become the standard of living. So maybe you don't even look at it as luxurious. It just looked at as the normal house for a physician, the normal car for a physician. And really, it's not even a physician, it's just people that make that kind of money. You're starting to see things that, hey, I can afford it. I think the best thing, that people could do is right out of the gate, like we always talk about, is so you become a doctor, an attending, you start making good money. First things before I would do anything is just focus on, let's say maybe go a year of making that money and just banking that money. That's extra. Just don't change your lifestyle for 1 year. See how many hours you're working per week. Maybe it's 50, 60, maybe it's only 40, but let's just round around 50. After that first year, my first focus would be on buying back 10% of my time. Get used to that. I would buy back 5 hours. So I'd take whatever I saved in that year, I would invest it into cash flow, passive income of some sort. And I would focus on, if I'm working 50 hours a week to make this much money, I would say, how can I work only 45 hours per week to make this much money? And I would start to make that a game where now retirement is no longer a game. The goal is, how quickly can I work 0 hours per week and still make this amount of money? And I think that's kind of, how I would do things. And then that's the beauty is, once you go down that path, as soon as you learn how to win that game, who cares? Go buy whatever house you want, go buy whatever car you want, because you're no longer trading your time to own and have those things. Now your money is working for you, and now it's totally passive. Once your money is working for you, the things the way you live, the house you have, the vacations you take are now limitless, because it's not constrained by you having to go put in hours to earn that money. Your money is sending the money back home so you can go do those things. So I think just doing that mind shift, just focusing on that first year, I got to get used to, how do I send my money to work and how do I bring in passive income? And then once you learn that game, that's what you focus on. And then you start buying the things that, you always dreamed about buying.
For sure. Is it too late now for those physicians that they're past that first year? I mean, they might have heard what you just said and been like, damn, I wish I would have done that, in my first year, but now I'm in year 12. I'm in my 40s. I already have kids in school. I'm in my practice. Is it too late for them to do that same strategy?
Yeah, I mean, it's never too late, right?
Mm-hmm.
It might be more difficult, but I mean, you kind of know my story. I went down that same
Mm-hmm.
rabbit hole, and granted, it wasn't physician income, but at the time it was 100,000 plus. When you're 20 years old making 100,000 plus, I mean, by your peer group, you're loaded rich.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going down that path, but then quickly found ourselves with the nicer cars, the nicer house, all this stuff. So we kind of, I'm giving advice based on what I should have done, not what I did at the time. So now
Sure.
what I did do answers your next question. Is it possible? Of course it's possible, but is it more difficult? 100%, because the problem is, now you have societal norms. Now you've invited friends to your big house that you bought.
Yeah.
You've taken people around in the fancy car. You've done all these things. You have become accustomed to this life. So now you got to just swallow the pride and say, I'm going to sell the big house. I'm not going to downsize to a shack, but I'm going to sell this big house and go to something that is just the minimum viable house. This is enough
Modest.
for
Yep.
us. Yeah. It's not like we're not struggling to live in this house. This is good enough for now. And you kind of need to go back to year one and just kind of offload a lot of that debt, sell the car, sell a vacation home, and that's what we did. We had the big, nice house. My wife had just bought a brand new car, and we finally had this new education and understanding about money. And we sold the house, we sold the cars, we
Mm-hmm.
downsized. We still had a house, we still had vehicles, but we downsized everything, got out of the debt, got out of those payments so we could reset. Then all that money that was going to debt and payments, mortgage payments, car payments, all this stuff, we started investing that. And then now over the years, as that money went to work and sent more money back home, well, now we can live back to how we were, a much more normal life to what we were used to at the time. And it wasn't even that huge of a commitment, I mean, time wise, it didn't take a long time. Most of the stuff happens much quicker than you realize. It's just pulling the band-aid off and actually doing it. I mean, people thought we were like in bankruptcy. Oh, I knew they couldn't afford that house. It's like, we
Mm-hmm.
can afford it, but we're giving up life to afford it. And we're just not willing to give up life anymore to afford this house. So we're making these decisions, and at the end of the day, really what it comes down to is, like, when you see somebody, I don't know, call it like ultra successful, they're just living life on their terms, living what most people would say a dream life. All it really comes down to at the end of the day is, like, that person was willing to make very hard decisions that most people were not willing to make.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a doctor's group of 100 physicians, maybe there's one or two that are just like, God, dude, that guy's just living the dream. Like, how does he do it? It really just is the fact that that guy is willing to make very hard decisions. Maybe he doesn't anymore, but before he lived in a modest house, before he drove a modest car, maybe still now he does. Maybe it's just fine. Like for us, we didn't really upgrade our house. You've been to our house, it's nothing
Mm-hmm.
fancy. We just found that, like, that big fancy house just didn't mean a lot to us. We had it, we did enjoy it, of course, but like, it just didn't mean a lot in the end. So when we start having more money, we didn't look at upgrading our house. We looked at upgrading our lifestyle and traveling and more and stuff. But I think that's really what it comes down to, is like, if you're willing to make the hard decisions, you'll be that one or two people that the rest of your peer group looks at and says, like, damn, man, like, what a life they get to live,
Mhm.
and it's not easy, I mean, it's not like your friends group support you. It's not like your family is going to be like, yeah, downsize your house now that you're making good money. And like, you have bad influence all around you,
For
but
sure.
you just have to know, and another tough thing is like, you have to have your wife and husband on the same page. Like if
Mhm.
Morgan wasn't willing to sell that car, that she had just bought, I mean, that would, not that it would have like ruined everything, but it would have set us back a little bit. And that mindset of having both parties on board and in that same direction, is really what's huge. So long way to answer your question, but it is possible even if you're out of your first year. It's just if you start that way, you don't really have to make those hard decisions to kind of go back to that fork in the
Mhm.
road. If you're already 5 years in, now you got to make hard decisions because you just realize, man, I missed that turn 5 years ago. I need to go back to that fork and go the other direction now. So it's just more difficult, but it's definitely doable.
For sure. There's going to be a lot of physicians that hear that, but be like, man, like good for you, Mike. But that just sounds super painful to do it. But again, I think it comes back to financial literacy. That if they have that understanding of making some of those hard decisions, going a couple years where you do take that step back and kind of reset yourself, pays dividends, no pun intended, down the road,
Yeah.
to create a better lifestyle like that what you guys are doing right now. One thing you mentioned a minute ago that I think it kind of goes in line with those early attending physicians that are just starting to make money. You guys are talking about debt. I think the biggest, I guess, crux, or I always use the analogy, like the biggest rock in someone's shoe that is a physician is like student loan debt. Whether it's, they want to go out and get a car loan, they want to go out and get a mortgage, because those are normal things that people do from a debt standpoint. You acquire debt to get an asset, but student loan debt is a big one, and watching that 5 figures turn into 6 figures by the time that they're all done with school can get painful. And a lot of them, and I shouldn't say a lot, that's making an assumption, but it is very common for physicians, once they come out, part of that lifestyle change, they do take a lot of money and throw it at student loan debt. Do you think that's a good strategy, or is it something that they should just treat like any other debt, and create a plan and stretch that out over a long period of time? Or should they just balls to the wall, just fully focus on student loan debt, getting rid of that?
So I'll answer that question. Then I just want to say one thing right
Yeah,
before
you
that,
got
though,
it.
is like you
Yeah,
said,
go
like
for it.
a lot of people say like, oh, good for you, but that's just too hard to make those decisions, and you
Mhm.
you hit it. And I just want to like re-emphasize what you said was, it's either hard now or it's hard later. You choose the hard. There is
Mhm.
no easy path to the finish line. It's hard either way. It's just making these hard decisions today or make them down the road, because you make those hard decisions today. Well, now fast forward 10 years and now you're, working only 20 hours a week and the other guy is still working 60. And it's like, well, now he's jealous of you. And you get to say, well, 10 years ago, I made super hard decisions so that life is easy today. Well, the guy who still has to work 60 hours a week, he never made those hard decisions 10 years ago. So he got to have
Mhm.
easy decisions 10 years ago. Well, now he's paying the price because he wants to be retired and he's still working 60 hours a week. We all come to a final day here. There is no easy path to get there. It's either hard today, easy tomorrow, or it's easy today, hard tomorrow. No matter what, you're going to have both. You're going to have the easy days and the hard days. It's just you choose, do I want to do them while I'm still young and I can deal with these hard choices? Or do I want to wait until it feel like it's too late and now I'm stuck and there's no time to go back and make these choices? So no matter what, these decisions are hard. It never is easy. But I believe the quicker you make hard decisions, the quicker you get on the path to easy street, easy life. I think that's a better route than waiting to deal with the hard stuff down the road.
I'm even going to layer on top of that before we go back to the student loan thing. Think back to our first question. We were talking about delayed investing. Imagine if you were a physician who didn't make hard decisions, and they get to that point of retirement where they've lived that $500,000 a year lifestyle, and now they are forced to make the decision of living $100,000 a year lifestyle because they didn't make harder decisions earlier in their career. Now they have no choice, right? They're getting close to their 60s. They've been promising their wife all these vacations in retirement and going to travel and see the grandkids. And now it's like, oh man, we just can't. Man, I really should have done a better job investing and creating a much stronger financial plan and make some harder decisions earlier in my career, because now I want to stop. My body won't let me keep working. My wife wants me to stop working because of the lack of time we have together. But now I'm forced to downgrade my lifestyle because I didn't make hard decisions earlier. That would be tough.
I mean, dude, that to me that sounds like hell. Like
That
that just
scenario.
sounds so terrible, right? But like so many people
Yeah.
do fall in that boat. They want to avoid the hard and like they keep kicking the can down the road, but at some point that day comes when it's like there's no more kicking this can down the road. I refuse
Mhm.
to make hard decisions my whole career, and like you said, now I just have to rip the band-aid off, and we just can't afford to live this way. My body and my mind won't allow me to keep working. At some point you start getting pushed out the door by the employer, and you're
Mhm.
thinking I can't afford to leave. I mean, it just becomes a terrible situation where there is no options anymore. At least when you make the hard decisions in the beginning, at least you have options available. Maybe if there's 10 decisions to make, maybe you make 6 hard ones and 4 easy, and like you don't want to go all in. That's better than 0, because at some point those options are no longer available and the only thing that's left is hard decisions, and there is no
Mhm.
good decision to be made.
Yeah, dude, this just I got that pit in my stomach just thinking about that possible decision for someone down the road. I mean, you know better than anyone. I've made a lot of hard decisions in the last 12 months. But again, it kind of goes back to what we're talking about. But it's like to not make those decisions now. And if I just waited and kept doing what I was doing for the next 30 years, I might have got to that point where it's like, yeah, I maxed out a 401k and that's about all I did. I didn't have the financial literacy that I did, 20 years ago. It would have been super hard, and I was just not going to put my family in that position. And I just know that there are physicians out there. There are some that they have a really good financial advisor, someone that puts together a great plan for them, and they're going to be just fine. I would say that there is a lot though that just whoever their employer is, they max out their 401k, they save for their kids' education, and then they just plan to just plug away until they are in their 60s and say, hey, whatever we got, and we'll just make it work to the best of our abilities for the remainder of our life. And that just making those decisions in your 60s, just makes my stomach hurt thinking about it.
Yeah, I see it as like a car flying down a road, right? Like say an expressway with all these exit ramps, and every time you fly past one, you're just closer and closer, like that brick wall at the end of
Mhm.
that road. And it's like the sooner you can get off that road, you see what's coming, you take the detour and you get around that brick wall, but not everybody does. And every time you fly by an exit, it's like, you're one step closer, like
Yeah.
so yeah, I don't know. It's a there's no doubt it's not easy. We've both made crazy difficult decisions that,
Hmm.
felt like it was super hard to make. But man, on the other side of those decisions, you thank God that you made that decision. You didn't make the other one because life would look a lot different. And I think the crazy thing is too, the more you make those difficult decisions that deep down are the right decision, and you just pull the band-aid off and you just do it, the easier it gets. So like that decision making also compounds, that once you do one and it turns out better than expected, next time you're like, I could do that again. And you start to be comfortable with making hard decisions. And the more comfortable you get, the easier they become. And all of a sudden, what seems very difficult, let's say 2 colleagues, one person never made a hard decision. That first hard decision, whether they're 30, 40, 50, 60, is so hard. But
Hmm.
if you've made hard decisions your whole life, now these are like easy to you because you've seen the fruits on the other side. So now it starts to compound and life gets better and better even quicker because you just make hard decisions, boom, like on a snap. You don't wait months and months to consider it anymore.
Well, yeah, well said, man. That was an excellent point. And I like the highway analogy, taking the exits. That's for people who are more visual. That's a great way to look at it, because everyone's had that thought of like, ooh, should I exit here? Nah, let's keep going. And then as
Yeah,
soon as you
yeah.
get past that exit, you're like, oh, I
Kids in the
really
back,
should have
like, I
taken.
got to go to the bathroom. I got to go to the bathroom. Like, you can hold it one more exit. And they're like, I can't hold it
Yeah.
anymore. Like, why don't I get out that
I
exit?
should have made a better decision. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
funny. Let's get back to student loans. I know you and I share a very similar student loan philosophy, but let's talk about the idea of student loans, especially for someone who becomes an attending physician. Typically you're making $200,000-$300,000 right out the gate, but you got $100,000 of student loans looming over you. You just feel that weight on your shoulders. Tell listeners about like your philosophy on what you think is best, or at least what makes sense to you as far as tackling student loans.
And let's tie it to a mortgage. Mortgage is super easy
Mhm.
for people to do. So they'll have, let's say even $200,000-$300,000 in student loans. And it feels like, oh my God, such a weight. I have these student loans. But that same person will go take out $1 million jumbo loan to buy a house. And that doesn't
Mhm.
feel hard. And really all it comes down to is, again, poor financial literacy. So they believe, because it's very normal and all their friends and their family and everybody supports them going to buy a house and taking out a mortgage, because they all did that same thing. None of their other friends and family have $300,000 in student loans. So their advice always from everybody is get that paid off. I can't believe you have student loans, because it's
Mhm.
just not normal in the world. In a perfect scenario, you would say, I'm going to make the minimum payments on my student loans for the rest of my life. And I'm also not going to take out a mortgage. You would go like double against society and do something totally different. Right. But for the most part, my philosophy, and this has served me very well. Maybe other people have different way of looking at it, but I've never missed a payment in my life on anything bill related. I've never missed a payment. I don't intend to ever miss a payment. And because that's my philosophy and it's my family's, like we care about our credit. So we're not going to miss a payment. So we know we will always make cuts to make sure that payment is made. We'll cancel a vacation. We'll do whatever we have to do. We won't make those same sacrifices to invest money. So I think it's very important to, when you have excess money, build those investing habits and start growing that money as an investment. Send that money out to work very quickly. Here's what happens when you take this advice. You pay the minimum payment. So you have to go to work to acquire the money, earn the money to make those minimum payments. But your excess money, you send it out into the world to work for you. The problem is most people put it in a 401k and it's tied up until they're 60. So they
Yep.
always have to earn money to make that minimum payment on the loans. And that sucks. That feels terrible. But if you stop focusing on, I'm sending this money to work for me one day, 30 years in the future, if you shift the focus to passive income and say, I'm taking these dollars that are excess that I earned, I'm sending them into the world to work for me today and send money back, very quickly, those dollars are earning enough income for you to cover that minimum payment. So now you never have to worry about a student loan payment again. They're fixed rates usually. The minimum payment never stays the same. Inflation works on your side because as your income grows, your minimum payment doesn't grow. That money that you've invested, which means sending George Washingtons out to work in the world and send more money home, at first it feels like, oh my God, this is awesome. Now they're sending enough money home to pay my minimum student loan payment. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, they're paying my minimum plus another $300 a month. And then it
Mhm.
becomes $1,000 a month. So now you don't even have to worry about the student loan payment because money from George Washington just hits your bank account and then automatically pays your minimum balance due. And then there's still money left there. And that money just keeps growing. And then you take that money and send it back into the world. And now not only do you have to go work to pay for your minimum payment, you're working less now. So you were working 60 hours and now you're only working 50 hours. And now all of a sudden, years later, you're only working 40 hours a week. And you still don't have to worry about the student loan payment because the investment money is paying for that.
Mhm.
So I think most people miss that boat. I think they get stuck in a terrible hole. They focus on just going to work and earning money to pay for the student loans. They pile all that money into the student loans. And you're guaranteed, if your student loans are at, let's say, 5%, that's the return on your money. When you go earn money,
Mhm.
you're piling that away to pay it off. The best you can do is 5%. You're missing all the huge benefits of the fact that your income will always grow. Inflation is generally always going to be there. It could be a cycle of disinflation or deflation, but generally
Mhm.
speaking, our economy always grows with inflation, which means that minimum payment is going to be easier to service 10 years down the road than it is today. You're just missing all the financial benefits of having a fixed interest rate, fixed minimum payment loan that is tied to it. And if you focus on paying that off, you're taking like a beautiful vehicle of fixed payments and you're wasting the entire benefit of it. And at the same time, you're wasting all that time to compound and grow investment passive income. So it's a double-edged sword that is not good. And it's just based on kind of lower, whatever, middle class investment mindset. A lot of
Mhm.
people, including us, come from a middle class. Though you got to realize that, like, if you come from a poor investment mindset, your parents weren't good with money, you didn't grow up in a community that was very good with money, you've never had these keys, you got to look at the world differently. Otherwise, you're just, whether you make a lot of money or little money, your life in the end will look like just, the investing decisions that you're making today.
The best way to summarize that is you shouldn't neglect or give up or forfeit your ability to invest in order to pay student loans. You also shouldn't only invest and not pay your student loans, right? You got to make those payments. There's people who just are like, yeah, I'm going to ignore it and it'll go away somehow. But having that balance of doing both, and I think the minimum payment philosophy is amazing, especially if most most student loans that are out there are anywhere between 4 and 6%. I mean, you can definitely put a bunch of George Washingtons to work that earn way above, even say a 6% interest rate on a student loan. You can get that back, and then you're not giving up the time that you have in the market or wherever it is that you invest. You're not giving up those years of not investing in order to pay more and more into a loan it's only 6%.
So one thing I talk about always, my first goal is buy back 10% of your time. If you're working 50 hours per week, buy back 5. But maybe we need to adjust that and say the first goal should be cover your minimum payment on your student loans. Take that off your shoulders, invest money until that passive income covers your minimum payments on student loans, and then start looking at your passive income, reducing how many hours you have to work. Because once that burden is off your shoulders, that minimum payment is covered without you ever having to think about it again. I mean, that just frees you up stress wise to make better decisions over and over. So maybe that needs to be the first goal, of that. And I would say one caveat is you kind of have to know yourself. Obviously, we're very disciplined with money, but that's our life, is to manage money and understand how it works. But if you are very bad at managing money and you're not going to take that extra income and invest it to cover the minimum payment, you're going to go buy another car, you're going to go shopping. Yeah, then if you don't have the discipline to focus on that goal of this investment money is going to return passively enough to cover the student loan payment, and then next I'm going to invest money to make sure I buy back 10% of my time. If you don't have the discipline to do that, then yeah, maybe pay down the student loans and get that burden off, because that the alternative is I'm going to go buy new cars and high end this and high end that. So yeah, if that's your alternative, then the focus needs to be on student loans first. But if you actually are disciplined to follow the path, first invest to cover the minimum payment on student loans, then next step is 10%. And by that time, I feel that it just becomes so addicting to have to work less and less and make the same amount of money that it becomes a game of how quickly can I work 0 hours and maintain the same lifestyle,
Yeah. And maybe it is one of those where you set the goal of, okay, I invest passively so that I can cover my student loan. Well, once that's kind of taken care of, how can I invest more to take care of the Porsche payment? Maybe I really want to have a Porsche because I'm a doctor and that's what all my friends have and that's what I should be doing. Okay, invest passively so that your Porsche payment's covered and you just don't even have to think about that. Or saving for kids' college. Hey, I want to save this much, but man, it's just really hard for me to put those dollars away when I have X, Y, or Z to take care of, or that I want to take care of, and be able to, yeah, like you said, I think that's the best knowledge. Make it a game to be able to invest so that the things that you truly want that do have payments to them are simply covered passively, and you just don't really have to think about it.
And we'll make a point 2.5 of the top 5 things that mess up people.
Yeah.
This is for Americans as a whole. There's this thing that has been pushed on us, but it very much goes to physicians. So it ties to your Porsche payment thing. So nothing wrong with owning a Porsche, but most people will commit so much to be able to acquire and own that Porsche. They don't realize how much time of their life they give up. So you save and you work forever before you finally own it and get to enjoy that Porsche, or you take out a loan and now you're committed to so many hours per week to pay that loan payment. Man, this is I feel like this is the biggest life hack ever, is just go rent the fun, because owning that Porsche is fun for a month. And then it's less fun because you've shown everybody now. And everybody's like, yeah, you own a Porsche, whatever. I've seen it. You drove it to all the events, you've done whatever, and now it's just not as exciting anymore. And now it just sits in the garage. So I would tell everybody, whatever, let's say you have $2,000 a month that you are going to commit to a Porsche payment, I would take that $2,000 a month and I would do every other month, I would do an exotic trip where I fly down to Miami and I rent a Porsche and I cruise the beach in Miami. And then I just turn it back into the guy at Turo. And I come home and work. And then next time I fly to San Diego and I rent a Ferrari and go up the Pacific Highway, so you don't have to commit to that. If you decide to change or the trip doesn't work, that's fine. But B, you don't have a Porsche just sitting in your garage because it was cool for a month, and you don't have that burden of paying for it over and over. And C, man, I think that's way more fun. I think it's way cooler than owning a Porsche in Chicago. I think it's way cooler to fly to Miami with your spouse, have an amazing weekend, and cruise a Porsche around, or fly out to, LA and cruise up the mountainside, looking at the Pacific Ocean in a Ferrari. You get to experience all these things without any of the burden, and I don't know. I really think there's so many things in life that we could experience for a fraction of the cost and would actually be way more impactful and joyful to us. but we
Mhm.
have this idea in the US of like, we have to own it. I can't enjoy it until I own it. And that's just not true. There's so many ways nowadays to be able to totally enjoy like this dream and not have to fully own it, not take the burden of ownership, just take the enjoyment of it.
For sure. I mean, good point. I'm the example of that. What car do I always get when I rent from Turo?
Yeah, Tesla.
Tesla. It's like I don't own a Tesla. I don't want to, but man, every time I have the chance or I need to rent a car for some reason, get a Tesla because they're fun to drive for a couple days. Why not?
Yeah. And even the Tesla probably gets more and more boring each time. So like at some point the Tesla
True.
won't be cool anymore. So like so not only when you rent it, by the third, fourth time, it's almost not fun anymore. Well, that's just proof that if you owned it, it would really be not exciting anymore because you drive it every
Hmm.
single day. So at some point, rather than having to sell a Tesla to get a new car, it's like when you want to rent a car, do something cool on a vacation, just pick a different car. It's like, okay, this car's cool. Now I'm going to do that. So yeah, I think so many people just look at it, they get so super focused, like tunnel vision, and I have to own this thing. And it makes life very difficult. It makes it very hard to achieve, and it becomes very burdensome, and you give up a lot of things in life, or you commit so many more hours of your life to work just to be able to own this thing that you never truly get to enjoy the thing that you own anyways.
For sure. I'm going to shift gears on you for a second. Number four, neglecting to set up an emergency fund. Right. The old adage in financial planning is have 3 to 6 months of living expenses saved up for the what if. What if you lose your job for a couple months? What if something catastrophic happens and you need cash? I feel like a lot of times that doesn't necessarily happen in a lot of professions. We're not just physicians, but a lot of people just don't have more than $500 on hand because they're out spending it, or they're out using it, they're doing different things. What is your philosophy on having an emergency fund within someone's financial plan?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you got to have a basic. I'm not a huge 3 to 6 month person.
Hmm.
I actually heard a scenario one time, which is like have an emergency network, not an emergency fund, which I think you got to tie two and two together. But like,
Hmm.
if I lost everything tomorrow, I could move in with you. Like, you're
Yep.
just not going to say no. Like, it's going to be terrible, but I could. I'm not going to be on the streets. So like, you don't have to have a over surplus of emergency funds, because if life gets that rough that you need that, you're going to have to make drastic changes, and you need friends and family available that are going to
Hmm.
help you through that tough time. I had an accident that no matter what emergency fund I had available, never would have made that time easy. The only thing that made that time easy was friends and family. So the
Hmm.
network and keeping good relationships is first and foremost. You don't want to live paycheck to paycheck. You definitely need to have a surplus available of some sort. However, there's multiple ways to have that surplus. And each person is going to be different, especially in a marriage, just the couples, each person within that relationship is going to have a different comfort level. Some will want 5,000, some will want 50,000 in an
Hmm.
emergency fund. So you have to find where that comfort is. But really what I look at as an emergency fund is you have to have access to cash in a bind. So if you have value in your house, maybe just go get a home equity line of credit. You don't have to use it. You don't have to take that money out, but you have a checkbook to access the equity in your house as cash if needed. So you don't want to, the problem is people go buy a car with it. And now you
Hmm.
just brought on a new payment. That's not what I mean. I mean, just have it there for an actual emergency that comes up. The furnace goes out, the roof, gets blown off and you're fighting with insurance, but you need a roof taken care of tomorrow. You need access to cash for those types of things. The
Hmm.
other place that a lot of people, especially people that make a lot of money, is they pile a ton of money into their 401k because it helps reduce their taxes. Well, almost every 401k out there, you can take out a loan from your 401k up to 50,000 or 50% of the value. So if you have $100,000 in your 401k, you have access to $50,000 by filling out some paperwork. So you always have access. So I think the emergency fund, there's a minimum balance in your bank account that just lets you sleep at night. And
Yep.
then you want to have access to cash. So I would think, there's multiple ways. Even a credit card, an unsecured credit card gives you access to cash because you're going to figure this out. It's just
Yep.
you need cash tomorrow until you have time to say, what am I going to do? So I would say credit card. I would have one that I never use that's locked up with a $20,000 credit line just to have
Yep.
it. I would
Yep.
have access, to my 401k, that if I need a loan, I can do that. I would maybe get my home equity line. It's free to set up a home equity line. Like some banks charge like 300 for the appraisal, but most banks want you to take a home equity line. They'll do it for no cost at all. So it's just access to cash sitting there. And all it took was filling out some paperwork. So access to cash is the key to that, with the emergency fund.
Yeah, well said. I have the same belief there. I mean, there's just other tools aside from, far too often have I met with people who've got hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting and saving. Well, that's my emergency fund. It's like, man, that's a lot of, to your point, George Washingtons that could be out working for you. It's a safety net. You said it earlier. Like everyone has that number in their account, whether you're a high income earner or a minimum wage earning employee. Everyone has that. Like, here's how much I want in checking. Here's how much I want in savings. If it goes below that, I start to get a little nervous. I think that's fine. But from a quick access standpoint, I don't think it's necessary to have just 6-7 figures sitting in a bank account for the what if.
And you have to ask yourself at some point, you have to say, is this for security and emergency, or do I just have a unhealthy scarcity mindset around money?
Good
And
point.
you have to be truthful with yourself and say, man, if I have to have 100,000 sitting in cash in the bank, is that actually necessary? When is in my whole life, ask your parents in their whole life, when have I actually needed $100,000 tomorrow?
Mhm.
And the answer is most likely never. And then you have to say, do I just really have a scarcity thing around mindset where I just don't truly believe that money is infinite in the world? And if I have that belief, maybe I need to focus on understanding why I have that belief. Did I grow up poor? Did I, have a life-changing event that made me just hold on to money and think that like I can never let this go? Because that scarcity mindset is going to totally limit your ability to grow if that's what you believe, and I mean, even just something as simple as inflation, like I said, inflation was as high as 9%. If you're holding that money that you earn super tight, it's just going to degrade away to inflation and you feel
Mhm.
safe, but really you're losing dollars every single day because you just can't, psychologically get over the fact that money is meant to be in the world working for you.
Absolutely. I think that's a good transition. You were talking about parents and keep going back into number five. Number five financial pitfall that we see a lot of physicians and any high income earner make is just ignoring estate planning, right? We spend our days saving up for, pay for kids' education, for our retirement. But what comes after that, I think, is super important. So failing to make a plan, I almost want to call it post retirement, right? For when you're no longer here. Why is estate planning so important for physicians, and why does that get missed so often? I mean, not I kind of layer on top of that. I just talked to a few different physicians earlier this week through a second opinion call that I asked like what, they had 3 kids. What was their will? How was that set up? And they're like, oh, we don't have a will. We haven't set up trusts and things like that. I don't think that's uncommon, but why is it so important for a high income earner to set aside time for estate planning?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're talking about making hard decisions, doing all these
Mm,
things. If you don't have the proper estate planning in place, it's all for nothing. So if you spend your life making hard decisions on behalf of your family, you're working 50 hours a week to earn income, you're doing all these things to build a great life. If you don't have estate planning in place, I mean, one accident, one something bad happens, and it was all for nothing, and that goes to, we're not going to get deep into it, but life insurance and disability insurance, those things as
mhm.
well, just to protect that one off. But I mean, really, that's the estate planning thing, is for how inexpensive estate planning is as well. I mean, nowadays, dude, you could write up your own trust and will for free on the internet, like just to
For
have
sure.
something, because that's really what it is you could go a whole life, do everything right, but miss that one piece of proper estate planning, and it could all be for nothing. In the end, the people who are going to benefit from all the hard work, all your investment income, all that stuff is going to be the attorneys that process your probate and bleed your family dry. And it's going to be Uncle Sam because you didn't properly set things up. So as the family has to sell things, there's going to be taxes that they have to pay. And obviously, if you don't have estate planning, I mean, it's very unlikely that your family is extremely well educated in how to handle these things. Like if you have estate planning, most likely they kind of have some education on what they're going to do. So it's again, a double-edged sword. If you don't take time to do estate planning, most likely the people who are inheriting your estate are going to be in the same boat, that they have no financial education, and there's going to be just vultures coming in that bleed them dry of, hey, you should have done this, you got to do this, pay me $300 an hour and I'll fill out the paperwork for you. Where
Hmm.
if you have a trust and a will, I mean, it's just so much limits the amount of money that needs to go to professionals to process that. And by taking that step to set up a trust and will, you're just going to by default naturally kind of educate your spouse and your children of, hey, if this happens, this is, how this would work. And they're just going to kind of passively learn a little bit about how this works. You're going to pass that on. So But, just to kind of sum up, the one answer is just, if you don't have proper estate planning, you may do all this in life. I mean, you don't even have to invest properly, but you may go to medical school, work a whole career, bust your butt for this whole time, and it all be for nothing because you didn't properly plan in the end.
Absolutely. And I think, just to summarize all 5 points that we talked about today, with estate planning being kind of that finality to it, kind of the end before you pass it on. Physicians plan, they'll meticulously, follow procedure, and they'll have patient diagnosis and patient recovery plans, and they follow the book, but doing it in their own finances, they just don't do it. And then you get to the end where it's like, man, we just did not put together a good plan of how this moves forward. Would be like taking a patient's diagnosis and just kind of putting it to chance, right? It's just
And
like,
I mean,
we'll see how it goes.
and even if they have a patient like that, right? I mean, what's the like common movie thing that doctors tell them, like, you're going to want to get your affairs in order, like,
Right.
so now, like, all of a sudden you're at the end and it's like, oh, great. So I'm going to die soon. Really, what I'd like to do is talk to my family about dying and do all this financial planning now. This would be a great time for me to do it. Like, that's the
Yeah.
last thing you want to do. You want to have all that
Mhm.
done when it didn't matter, so you can enjoy the rest of your life. For me, dude, I was 35 years old laying, I was a little bit younger, 33 years old at the time,
Mhm.
laying under a tractor, dude. I thought I was going to die. Like, there's also those moments of specific, all of a sudden, totally unexpected. It could be cancer with a 1 month, outlay.
Mhm.
Like, you don't know when it's coming. That's why you got to plan for it, so you never have to worry about it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that was our 5 points, the 5 financial pitfalls that many physicians fall into. Hopefully there were some great takeaways from today. I mean, you crushed it again with philosophy and ideas on how to get, ahead of the investing game early on, how to reduce lifestyle inflation, making sure that we're tackling student loan debt appropriately, having an emergency fund, but not necessarily doing it from a cash standpoint. You talked about some great tools that are out there alternatively for that emergency situation. And then obviously the importance of estate planning as you get near the end, tying a bow around that and making sure that everything's all good.
I love doing these things, and I think it's important for, everybody kind of just take a step back. I think so many people just kind of all of a sudden end up and they like blink and they're like, oh my God, I'm 50. I haven't even considered any of this. Now what? So I think that's the whole purpose of this, right? Is just to give people a moment to say, just stop and think, just gain a little clarity and just take a look and say, am I on the right path or am I not? And if I'm not on the right path, you just swallow that pride and say, listen, I made some mistakes, time to make some hard decisions. Let's go ahead and get this thing back on the right path so that we can, live stress-free for the rest of our life. So yeah, hopefully, some of this stuff just kind of gives a moment of clarity for somebody to consider and look at their own life and say, do I need to make a change? And if so, man, it's time to just make the tough decision and get it over with.
Well said. Well, it was good hanging out with you again. Until next time.